So our theme this month is interdependence and thinking about how we're connected to life and to each other. And I have two chalice circles I'm lucky to be a part of. And I have one that meets in the morning and one that meets in the evening of the same day. So I get to talk about the theme, for about 3 hours in one day. So it makes me really happy. And in one of, actually I think both of the circles, I recalled a story about a relationship. Because one of the exercises that we had, and some people were kind of like, how do we do that? Build a relationship with a sibling from the natural world. And so as to think about an animal, a flower, a plant, or a body of water you have an affinity with, and deepen your relationship with it. And then you introduce yourself and all these things. Some people were like, I don't know about that. But I was thinking about when I was a little girl in South Carolina, we had this pine tree. And it was one of those sticky, sappy, burly cones. But it was probably about 30 years old, definitely not an ancient one that we heard about just a minute ago. And it was on the border of my neighbor's yard. And their dog, Fred, would chase me up the tree sometimes, and I would go up that tree. I also would go up that tree when I was escaping neighborhood kids, my sister and my brother. And I got married for the first time underneath that tree when I was 5 years old. My parents had gotten divorced, so I stole my mom's rings and put them on. Later, they were replaced with tinfoil rings, which were much safer. But I said my vows beneath that beautiful tree And the relationship I had with that tree was one of solace and one of escape and one of shelter. And I think about all the places that I have lived, and I often bond with a tree. In my front yard now, during the pandemic, my spouse and I built a labyrinth garden, and it's a 7-circuit labyrinth like the one in Phoenix Park. And it's been a joy to figure out how to make the plants work and all this. But there is a beautiful crabapple in the middle. And that's kind of the crowning joy that you go inward and there's this lovely tree. And I knew it was spring when 20 robins descended on the tree to get the little fruits before everything blossomed. And so that's my tree here in Eau Claire, is that crabapple. And so as your spiritual homework of some kind, I invite you to think about, a body of water. Some people are very bonded with Lake Superior, or maybe Half Moon Lake, or one of the rivers locally, or maybe a tree or an area. And think about what we can learn. Some of you might have seen those T-shirts that say, lessons from a tree, or what you can learn from an eagle. And I think there's so much that we can learn when we don't separate ourselves from nature. I grew up with a pine forest behind me, and we also had the Broad River. And as a late 70s kid, I had the run of the woods for most of the day. My mom would say, "Come back at dinner time." And now, I think I was, 5 years old running around the woods. I did have my dog, and the adventures we would have, with, going into farmers' lands, finding tree stumps to dig under and see what we could find to see if there were fairies or buried treasure, and just all of the imagination that nature held for me in that space. And so when we think of nature and trees, I wonder, what is it that we're learning? Ralph Waldo Emerson and other transcendentalists believed in the spark within, that the divine spark that connects all things, believing that connection isn't found just in our mind alone, but through intuition and creativity and that direct experience. And he used to call the old Unitarian Christians the frozen chosen. It's like, get out of your pews, go outside, touch a tree, go for a walk. That was a big thing with Transcendentalists, is being in nature, going for a walk. Henry David Thoreau was big on that. And Transcendentalists had faith, just as modern UUs do, that we can find our spiritual truths and inspiration without some priest or scholar or book, but by direct understanding. And so, even though I consider this a sacred space, the whole planet, this whole planet that we're a part of, ancient beings like 4,000-year-old trees and bodies of water that have life that we have no idea. Like in the deepest trenches of the ocean, there are some funky life. There is some really funky life. And, there's just so much beauty and wonder in the world. And I think about how much time I spend not noticing it, and how much I miss out when I forget that I too am a part of life. And so we think about earth, my body, water, my blood, air, my breath, and fire, my spirit. And so that connection to all of the elements, like today when the rain came, I was like, oh, and I'm like, wait a minute, my tree, my garden, all the Chippewa Valley, we need that rain. How beautiful it is. And some of us think that we have to leave the ordinary world in order to experience the mystical. And maybe we go to the mountains draped in green and lush trees. The birds are nagging, and there's this lush otherness. And, when we escape to the mountain, we have these ideas that there maybe is some great guru on top, that we will learn something. And in lots of traditions, there's the idea of going off into wild spaces to find our truth. And in Rabbi David Cooper's book, Entering the Sacred Mountain, he writes of his first retreat. He was drawn to this famous mountain retreat where many gurus from the 60s and 70s had studied. And it's the high hermitage of Lama Mountain. And it's just below the ridge of the San Cristobal Range, and it overlooks northern New Mexico. And the name Lama means mud, and a local spring on that mountain was supposed to have healing qualities. And a well-worn path cuts across the mountain, not passing very far from the hermitage where the rabbi first retreated. And for dozens of generations, that trail became known as the Peace Trail, because many hundreds of years ago, there was a story that hostile tribes covenanted that no acts of war would be tolerated on that path. So Lama Mountain became a symbol of healing. And people continue to be transformed in that space. Well, what is your Lama Mountain? Is it, Half Moon Lake when you're out on your little paddle canoe? Or is it, some place in your backyard? And what is it that you can do to feel connected? We're earthbound creatures. We have gravity. And it's not just in heights or in the sky that we are lifted. Rabbi Cooper recounted that from this height, over 9,000 feet above sea level, weather fronts could be sighted for hundreds of miles away. Thunder clouds larger than cities move ponderously across the valley below. 1,000 shades of gray swirl into the other, mixing like huge cauldrons, like a witch's brew. And when the clouds come closer, thunder prevails, and the sisters of bedlam, chaos, and pandemonium shriek into the wind. And I understand this completely, what it is to be caught on a storm and a mountaintop, to be laid bare to Mother Nature, to be stripped of the things that separate us from the elements. What is my power and strength when there are ancient trees and driving wind? And how am I a part of all that? This coming summer and fall, the congregation has been very kind to grant me a sabbatical. And I will be going to the Mountain, which is a UU retreat center in Highlands, North Carolina, in October. And this is a place that I used to go all the time when I was in seminary and when I lived in Atlanta, Georgia. And it's at the top of Scaly Mountain. And there's a 400-year-old ancient small growth oak forest. And some people call it a cloud forest. And the uniquely wind-gnarled trees, they decorate the landscape, and they're dwarf oaks, and so they kind of look like something from a Halloween. When I first saw them, I thought, what is that? What type of tree? But it was 400 years ago. Think about where we are now. 400 years ago, those were being born and growing on that top. And so retreating to the mountaintop is a metaphor for laying ourselves bare, for taking away the barriers between us and life, between us and each other. And so when I look out at all of you, we're beings made of skin and tissue and breath and beauty, but we're part of a living and breathing planet. So are we cells in that body? Are we birds in a tree? I don't know. Think about your metaphor. But when we can think about that connection and how we depend on each other, when people put PFAS into our well water, we suffer. When we cut down large old-growth forests, that affects habitat. It affects our connection with the past. And so each thing we do affects the web, both good and not so good. And so when I think about trees, I think about that connection. And the more we learn about nature, the more we learn about that we don't understand. Trees speak to each other, warning of predators and danger. They feed each other, thinking of the collective instead of just the individual. According to the 3,000-year-old Scandinavian poetic Edda Yggdrasil, the world tree stands at the center of the universe. Recent science shows that they do indeed stand at the center because they talk to each other. They connect with each other. And what are they telling us? Suzanne Simard was an ecologist that wrote The Hidden Life of Trees, and she discovered that trees grow better when they're close together, contrary to what your landscaper may tell you. And via threads of fungi, they connect to each other much farther than their own roots. Trees have a symbiotic relationship with fungi, and while most trees help their own species, think about the metaphor, how we help people who look like us, sound like us, some have symbiotic relationships to other species of trees, such as the birch and the fir. Trees also communicate via electrical impulses, but these only travel 1/3 of an inch a second, or to put it another way, 1 inch every 3 seconds. It isn't just in J.R.R. Tolkien that trees talk to one another, or on a Captain Planet cartoon. In our backyards in Sherman Park or Carson Park or the Great Smoky Mountains, trees have lessons in living together. In our 7th principle of Unitarian Universalism, we talk about the interdependent web of which we are all a part. And so I wanted to share just briefly, this is the book that inspired today. It's In Search of the Old Ones, An Odyssey Among Ancient Trees. And it really inspired me to think about part of my sabbatical as well, and I'll share that in just a second. But this is just a brief quote. Resolute sentinels of time, trees consistently engender admiration and affection. There are something like 3 trillion of them, or approximately 422 trees for every person on Earth, and more than 60,000 species. I can probably name 10 species. There are 60,000 or more. Generations of botanists, both amateur and professional, have celebrated trees for wisdom as sacred beings and metaphors of youth and old age, as well as for their solidarity and their ancestral roots and evolutionary resilience. Saints, emperors, despots have consulted trees, seeking their guidance. Pantheons across the world have included tree spirits, druids, and forest gods among their sacred beings. Trees are graceful, muscular, and quite often just plain magnificent. We have built our shelters in them. In Africa, the baobab tree has served as prisons or classrooms. In Ireland, hollow trees become hermitages for medieval monks seeking solitude. In India, fig trees are an embodiment of the human psyche and a dwelling for gods. All around the world, people have revered trees for their commercial value, environmental luster, and virtual splendor. So, who is your tree friend? What will we do for our tree friends? There is something terribly important about touching green things. I know there's something about microbial, something or other, touching dirt and helping depression and anxiety. I know that by the time spring comes around, I'm ready to bury my face and just kiss the dirt, because it hasn't been that cold of a winter, but the darkness and the season just make me hungry to be connected to growing things. So people like Henry David Thoreau believed that the spirit of humanity was essential for us to understand our connection with the earth. So lastly, when I think about earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my spirit, some of my most profound experiences have been in nature. And this summer, I've been thinking about what to do with my sabbatical. I have most of it planned out, probably too much. But I wanted to go on a pilgrimage to look up labyrinths, because I've been obsessed with labyrinths for a while, as you know, or some of you know. But I also think I want to go find ancient trees. And this is really amazing. I found out there are 3 stands of ancient trees in Wisconsin. And I was planning on going day trips to find all the labyrinths I could find within a drive. But there's a book that was written by a Wisconsinite, Our Living Ancestors, The History and Ecology of Old Growth Forest in Wisconsin and Where to Find Them. So there's one, there's one in Cathedral Pines, which is in the natural area of Oconto County. Have any of you guys been to that one? No? Okay. It's got old growth pine and hemlock trees in the Chemaquin, thank you, Nicolet National Forest. And anyway, it's got the most old growth. There's also Drummond Woods in Bayfield County, and this has old growth pine and hemlock. And Germain hemlocks, which is old growth pine and hemlocks, and that's near Oneida County. So anyway, if you get a chance, get out and touch Mother Earth. And when we think about all the things that we care about, when we care about each other and our planet, we invest in the sacred worth of all of life and in ourselves as living beings. Amen and blessed be. Thank you.